And welcome to the Social Justice Forum. I am your host, Daren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. Now, if you ask the question, what is the show all about? We bring you a forum providing a deeper understanding of the issues and inequities that so many communities face, things such as systemic inequalities to pressing social problems. Our guests will provide multiple perspectives as well as insights, helping us better understand and address these challenges. So we invite you to stay connected with us. The Social Justice Forum starts now. Welcome back. And Housing Justice for All is a coalition of over 80 groups leading the charge for housing as a human right. And one of its key partners is Community Action for Safe Apartments, also known as CASA. CASA's work includes organizing tenant associations, running campaigns to prevent displacement, and advocating for city and state policies protecting renters. Joining me now is CASA's leader and tenant and housing advocate, I should say, Fitzroy A. Washington, and or I should say Christian. I'm sorry, Fitzroy A. Christian. I apologize. I said Washington. Thank you, Fitzroy, for joining me.
And thank you for having us with you.
Listen, I thank you for joining us. And amidst everything that's going on politically, socially, economically, a lot of people are really just challenged with the whole issue of affordable living. And so the work that you do and the your organization does is really try to provide for tenants' rights.
Yes. Not only tenants' rights, but their human rights. Because without a home, you don't have the foundation on which your family can rest and build. You're not really a part of a community. And without our community, our neighborhoods, we are left as nomads, just keep bouncing from borough to borough, from apartment to apartment. We are not able to be stable. We are not able to settle so we could start building generational wealth so that our children will inherit what we have worked for and continue um, wealth building generation after generation. So, yes, it is not just simply about housing, though that is a crucial part of it. It is what we as a society is not doing, we are not doing to ensure that we have stable, permanently affordable, not just temporarily affordable housing, so that we could begin to plan our lives as full human beings and begin to make plans for our future, the future of our children and our grandchildren in our own communities that we have built.
And you speak about housing being a human right. When we talk about it, it seems like it's a basic necessity to live, but so many people are denied the right to fair housing, adequate housing. Um, Talk to me from your perspective on how you view housing as that human right.
If we could go back a little bit and think about the United Nations Charter and its Declaration of Human Rights, one of them say that all humans are entitled to certain rights as human beings, and among them being education, health, food, and housing. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, without housing, we don't have the foundation in which to build anything. We can't build family, we can't build community, we can't build nation. Um, so it is a human right, it is a necessity. And the fact that the United States sees housing as a commodity, something to be monetized, something for which a smaller number of people get tremendous wealth, while the mass of people um, have problems living in safe, healthy, um, livable apartments and even homes. Um, it's a major contradiction. And the fact that the United States had, I think it was First Lady Roosevelt, um, as the poster girl holding up the United Nations Charter and the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and the country does not support it. What they do, and in states like New York, they give you a right to shelter, which is limited. And we are fighting against that. Our hope is to have human in New York State and around the country as a human right, that it is a constitutional right, that it is properly funded so that all of the inequities in housing that we're seeing now will disappear.
Yeah.
And people can begin to live and plan as a family, as a community, for how they're going to be living well into the future.
One of the challenges that's being talked about today, the year 2024, is the repercussions that have happened since COVID. A
Yeah.
lot of evictions happen. A lot of people have been waiting for the moratorium to go away so that way people could be uh, utterly evicted. But there is on the books right now the good cause eviction protections. I want to get your take on, first of all, the law itself, and then share a little bit about, we'll talk a little bit about the work that's being done there with the organization and really wrapping around that.
Okay, I will speak to that question in a second, but I just want to note that the good cause eviction bill does not stand in silo. It is a part of a series of bills that we're pushing in Albany that includes making the right to counsel, which is a major problem right now, a statewide law so that it covers all renters in New York State. And the benefits that we are getting in New York City will be extended to all renters in New York State. It is also connected to the reform of the Rent Guidelines Board, which is a city agency set up by the state to regulate the cost of housing for renters in New York City. That has to be revamped completely. We're also talking about extending the ETPA, the Emergency Tenant Protection Act, which allows counties and other municipalities in New York State to opt into the rent stabilization program so that it takes the power away from landlords to jack up the rent to whatever levels they want. But these places become regulated by the state Department of Community and Housing Renewal. Having said that, the Clean Hand Bills is stating that if the landlord's hands are dirty, if they are not maintaining the buildings to the warranty of habitability standards that they are required to do by law, if they're not maintaining the buildings to the state and city building codes as they are entitled to or they're obligated to, they cannot have a right to try to evict a tenant when their hands are dirty. So for them to be able to pursue an eviction case against a tenant, their hands must be clean. The building must be up to the standard of the building codes. There must not be any serious violations in the lodge against those landlords. They have to have clean hands. If they are not meeting the standards set by the laws, then they cannot pursue an eviction case against a tenant who may be behind in rent or who maybe the landlord may be accused frivolously or not of a breach of lease for whatever reason.
As you look right now, what is the state of evictions from your perspective? Are we seeing more and more now?
Yes. And that rests completely in the hands of the Chief Justice of the state of New York, Chief Justice Wilson.
And is
Because of
mhm.
the,
No,
sorry,
good.
let me
Can
just
continue. I'm
quickly
sorry.
this.
I delay in my ear. Go ahead. Keep going.
Mm. Yes, there was a massive increase of cases that got bogged down in the system you know, during the pandemic because of the moratorium that we got and that we keep extending during the heat of the crisis of the pandemic. The courts were closed. There were no cases going forward. So when in June 2022, the last moratorium eventually ended, there were over 200,000 cases that were on the books. In the meantime, while the cases were not moving forward, landlords were still filing cases in court or had the preparations already in place. They were prepared so that the moment the moratorium lifted, they could file their hundreds of thousands of cases that they had prepared during the pandemic. The end result was that there were probably over 400,000 cases in the housing court system. Chief Justice Wilson, he chose to clear his calendar. And in the process, he began to deny tenants who were eligible for right to counsel, a law that was passed in 2017 here in New York City, their rights to that full representation by an attorney in court when they're facing eviction, because his focus, his emphasis was in clearing the backlog. With a simple stroke of the pen, he could order the courts, which comes under his jurisdiction. All courts in New York State come under the jurisdiction of the Office of Court Administration. As a Chief Justice, he could say, we are going to slow down the process to allow all of those people who are eligible for full legal representation in housing court get the opportunity to get the attorney, and that attorney will be able to represent them, assert the tenants' rights. Um, the fact is that after the law was passed in 2017, in the first year, more than 80% of the people who had representation were able to stay in their homes. Landlords were not able to get everything they were demanding because they were at fault in a lot of the cases. And tenants won. The following years, the pandemic hit us, so we were not able to work it out properly the way we wanted to. But since then, what has happened is the Chief Justice is saying that waiting for tenants to find their lawyers and for all of the paperwork that is involved in filing motions, um, more and more conferences between the courts and the two sides, is delaying the process of clearing up his calendar. And he's not doing that. He wants his calendar cleared. So what we have here is that from last June through now, there were over 20,000 cases that moved forward in the court in the Bronx alone. And I think it was 40 something thousand citywide that was moved along. Many of them included tenants who were eligible for the free legal assistance, but were not given the opportunity to contact their attorneys and have themselves represented. A large number of them were evicted. We're trying to get all the numbers together for end of year. So I don't want to send out preliminary numbers, which may change. But there are tens of thousands of people who were evicted citywide, who are eligible for legal assistance. Many of them would not have been evicted if they were given that opportunity.
I want to talk about this. Let me cut it here for because you talk about
Uh,
you talk about there would be this opportunity if they had legal assistance, right? So I
Yep.
want to go to this place of like, first of all, awareness, because I think a lot of tenants don't necessarily know their rights. If you fall behind on your rent, sometimes you feel a little less than. And to be honest with you, so many people are just surviving that they really are not abreast of the rights. So how do you go about making them aware, tenants, of their rights, and then at the same time, doing a better job of how do you go about preventing this displacement right here in the Bronx and beyond?
Okay. There are several ways in which we do that. Um, the Right to Counsel Coalition is based in downtown Manhattan, but we have branches and organizations like CASA, Northwest Bronx, Clergy and Community Coalition. We have Mothers on the Move. We have South Bronx Rising. We all inform our members of it. At CASA, we have workshops and teachings where we let our members know that this right exists. We also have in each of the boroughs, each of the 5 boroughs of the city, what we have court watch, what we call court watch. Our members go out to the courts every morning. We meet tenants on the line and we say, hey, look, this is what is happening. These are your rights. This is what you can do. These are the organizations in your community who have the legal assistance, the organizing capabilities to help you fight your case and keep you in your homes. We have citywide meetings where we plan about the things that we need to do, how we do it, the campaigns that we are going to launch to make sure there's wider public knowledge of these rights, who to contact in their communities. So we do that. We also have our members who go inside the courtrooms. And when we notice that they're being badgered, being intimidated, being really harassed by the landlord's attorneys, we intervene. We will say, can I speak with you a minute, please? Because you're being taken advantage of here, and I'm going to let you know what your rights are and how you can proceed, and how you do not waive your rights or give up anything that you do not need to give up in this case. And we will speak to them, explain to them. Many of them will go back to the landlord's attorney and say, no, I'm not doing this. I'm going before the judge. I'm going to ask for an adjournment and get this resource that I was not aware of, and then we will come back from here. These are some of the strategies we use to spread awareness so that people know they're not really alone, but they have these resources available to them and they should take advantage of it because it allows them to stay in their home.
Yeah, I'm thinking that when you do this, that's a great reprieve for the, for the tenant, knowing that there's this assistance there and knowing that you've got somebody that can help them throughout, throughout due
The
process.
whole process, right?
Yeah, because that process can be a long and a lengthy one. And we all know that, attorneys work, attorneys work to try to get somebody to settle, but that's the benefit of having a community based organization such as yourself to really be able to say, listen, you know what? Don't take the quick road. Fight this through.
Yes.
Let me get before we get out of here. I do want to get an opportunity for you to be able to share when and where are your meetings, so that way people who are watching right now can have an opportunity to possibly, find out more information or come by.
Okay, we are located at 35 Massey Place here in the Bronx, the Southwest Bronx. That's 2 blocks south of 170th Street, and it's at the corner of Walton Avenue and Massey Place. We have monthly workshops where we discuss tenants' rights, your rights as a rent stabilized tenants. The workshops also include your rights during the winter season, so you know what you should be getting, what when the temperature changes, what your indoor temperature should be. We run them through the process of calling 311 to register their complaints, um, mice infestation, bug infestation, cracks, leaks, any problems, mold, mildew, any problems they may be having. We walk them through the process of doing that. And we also ask them as community members, people who are feeling pain, what is it that is bothering you? And we will build training around that. We also have meetings where we have members on a campaign to reform the Rent Guidelines Board. The public is welcome to come and join us. We have a monthly open community meeting where the entire community is invited to come along, see what we're doing here, but what we're doing, make contact with us. We have campaigns about the Rent Justice Coalition, what it means, and how we, as the people who are being impacted, can affect the direction that these campaigns take. Because it is those of us who are feeling the pain will come up with that solution. We cannot divine what a solution is for other people. So when they come into our meetings, to the campaign meetings, to our workshops, to our teachings, that they learn that they can make a very important contribution to the direction that these events take. And they're going to be participating in it themselves.
That's
Part of it is to empower them. We give as much power as we can to our community members because the power is knowledge. what I should say, knowledge is power, and with that power, they can move mountains.
Yes.
You are a pastor, so I know that hits you right where you go every Sunday morning. That when you have power, you have that belief, and you come together as a community,
Indeed.
that you can do wonders. Yes, go ahead, sir.
No, indeed. Fitzroy, I got to leave it there, though. But I do want to thank you for taking the time and sharing with us. And so great having you here with us. And certainly you have a great day. And thank you for the work that you're doing with CASA in helping lives and helping those in the issue of tenanted housing and being that advocate. Thanks a lot so much for being with us.
And thank you also for having us here, because what you're doing now is helping us to spread that awareness.
Yeah.
And out of this, I'm hoping that we could get a few people say, "Oh, I heard it in the social forum," and two, three, five more people will know, and then that spreads. Soon we have 100 from that five that you sent to us. We do appreciate it. We thank you very much, and we hope this is not going to be the last time. I'm open to an invitation, even for a 1 hour dialogue, just talking about the whole issues and how it affects our children's education, not having a home base,
Yeah.
the lifetime issues that they face. Yeah, we're open for more invitations. So we
Definitely,
could be practicing
definitely.
that.
I'll have to send that up to my producer. That's above my head, but we'll make sure we get you in here and you come on back and talk to us a little bit more. Thank you so much, Fitzroy.
Okay.
Good to have you, brother.
And thank you very much, sir. And again, thanks to Social Forum for inviting us.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. All right, we are going to take a quick break, but guess what? We'll be right back right after this. And welcome back. Africa Everything is a collective of conscientious creators dedicated to empowering West Africa through academic initiatives. Their mission addresses the pressing challenge of educational access in regions with scarce resources and often inadequate infrastructure. Here now is the founder and executive director of Africa Everything, Aisha Diori. And thank you so much for being with us.
Glad to be here, Daren. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And so I want to ask you about this here because when we talk about really educational enrichment, there is a cultural disconnect, if you will, in some sorts. Bring us up to speed as to where we are when we talk about education, West Africa.
So I was brought up in West Africa myself too. So one thing I noticed is that there's a disconnect happening with making sure that there's safe learning spaces and there's opportunities with what's going on the ground. So I decided about 8 years ago to create an initiative that will target and work with empowering youth and young adults on the ground in West Africa to either we do infrastructure change, which is, for instance, we had a school that had no roof and the kids were learning and it was raining on them. So imagine that what that looks like. So I was able to get the collective together to have an event where we raised enough money to build the roof. We have students that have gotten scholarships from Africa Everything that now are about to finish college or creating their own businesses. So it's like 360-degree kind of like circular in empowering people for change. Because if you're able to offer it and give it, I think it's best because you kind of really create these dynamics where you kind of push in the gap, because a lot of, as you know, Africa is trending. Africa is the now, and education is one of the most important components. And being able to offer that with the creative collection, so it's very grassroots fundraising we do to help, and 100% of everything that's raised goes back into our projects in West Africa.
When we talk about Africa as now, that's so critical, because I think it's not just now, it's been, but many people have just failed to really grasp and really hone in on the fact of the gem that Africa is in terms of community, in terms of culture, resources. I think there's a certain segment of people who really know about it. But there's also another population who's also ignorant to it. And so talk to us about, as you begin to educate people about West Africa, a little bit of the ignorance that's out there for people who should know but really don't know?
Let's start with people that still think that you're going the way that you got here to America was by a canoe.
Right.
These are some of the misconceptions, right? And even me, when I was going to college, or when I was, when I was, we get the term like African booty, the African something scratcher, this and that. You're swinging from trees. There are people till today, and I'm like, oh, come out, because part of our thing is also taking the diaspora back home so they can learn more. So I'm like, come on my Ghana trip, come on my Nigeria trip. They say, no, I don't want it. It's dangerous there. I'm like, it's dangerous there? It's dangerous anywhere that you're at, right? But there's been a preconceived notion of what has been fed to see what Africa is. Africa is cutting edge. They're leading the charge when it comes to tech. They're leading the charge when it comes to social media. Nigeria uses more social media than anybody in the world. So like when you're talking about Africa is not in the now, or those kind of like ignorant comments that were created, like, stereotypes and things still till this day go on. There are people that will not go to Africa. And there's even a divide where people that were, they're saying that the ADOS people that are, we're African American, we're American, like Black Americans, right? And, the Black Americans came from somewhere.
Right.
And they don't
Right.
accept it.
Right. That's a huge education. I mean, I think I once had a young lady on the show, Mercy Masika, who is, done some great things in Kenya, #1 gospel artist in Kenya, invited me to come out to Africa and to spend some time with them in Kenya. I went out there, and I went out there, and it was so funny because as we were beginning to talk, what we found out was that here in the United States, we're only seeing a certain segment of Africa. And I've known that for a minute, but really to hear through their lens, we only see a certain segment of Africa. But then also to find out from their perspective, they only see a certain segment of America. And it's almost like until you get there, you'll never really understand the full magnitude of Africa/West Africa for this segment.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. I think that's why organizations like Africa Everything are very imperative, because we bridge that connect. We let you know that we are all the same people, and we are stronger together. We're not siloed. I think one thing we were divided. I just really say even during transatlantic slavery, everybody was dropped in different spots, right? But we are still we're the same people hailing from some of the same areas, and as much when we start to realize the things that make us the same people, we would grow better and start thinking about what we see and what's going on. And I think that sometimes we imbibe media or listen to what others or stereotypes are, and don't think about what it is that is the truth and not the truth about either places, Africa or here. And as you can see, there's a movement now. A lot of people are going to Africa, traveling to Africa. And Ghana is choked in December. Everybody's there. But there's other African countries, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get out and see. And I tell people, till you visit Africa, you've missed a lot. I'll leave it like that. I can't tell you exactly what I told because we're on television, but yeah, you missed a lot. Let me go here for a moment. When we talk about the work that you're doing, obviously bringing education to the forefront, educating. Let somebody know exactly as they become a part of the organization and find out about your organization, some of the groundbreaking work that you are doing.
Okay, so I can even start. Like I said, we started 8 years ago. So the first event was, a collaboration with creatives to create like a fundraising party Afrobeats event to get people to come, and they all had to dress in African wear. So we're amplifying the culture within the stuff that we do and teaching people. I remember that first time, people were like, where can I get an outfit? Where can I get an outfit? And that was 2017. I said, there's outfits everywhere. But literally with the money that we've raised, we've been able to impact 5 different countries so far. We've done Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, Abidjan, and Senegal. So in Nigeria, we were able to pay for young designers' schooling, as well as get her some supplies for her projects. And now she owns a store with 4 different tailors. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Somebody that just started, and then we were able to, help foster that. In Ghana, we've renovated 3 schools. In Liberia, we actually renovated the school of Marcus Garvey, the James Stewart School. it was dilapidated in Liberia, because they had the war going on in Liberia. So we were able to renovate the James Stewart School in honor of Marcus Garvey. So that was a big one. And in Abidjan, currently we're working on renovating a school in Port Bouet in Abidjan, which is a francophone of West Africa. So we're trying to do one country at a time, but fundraising is not an easy task.
No, no, not at all. And you gotta keep your feet to the fire when it really comes to fundraising. But I want to go to July because July, you'll have an opportunity to raise some funds and also make a tremendous impact. July 28th at Slate NYC, you got a very special event taking place.
Yes, we do. This is our annual fundraiser. It's held every July for 8 years. So this is our 8th year. I can't even believe I've been doing this for 8 years. So during the event, you get to see and immerse yourself in culture. First things first, like I said, is an African attire fair. That is the dress code because we're going to be empowering our culture. But we have also been partnering with Caribbean organizations as well. So we have the African and Caribbean culture in full swing. You should expect like you're on a mini Labor Day parade on the dance floor. You should expect fashion from up and coming and amazing African and Caribbean designers, as well as a vendor market where we empower biopic vendors to create, like a nice a la carte exclusive market to sell their things there. And there's going to be performances, dancers, saxophonists, drummers, you name it, you get it. And literally, it is the cheapest all-inclusive event that you can go because I want to make sure the pricing was right for everyone because everybody wants to give back. But how can we give back without having to sit down at $1,000 table and look at each other? Right. So it's amazing. I will definitely share the video with you from last year, Barry, so you can see it. And hopefully I'll see you there.
Listen, let's see, July 28th. I have to find out where I am on my calendar. You may see me there. You never know. Let me go here. Talk to me about really when we talk about community, right? Because a part of what we're trying to do, you're trying to do is really impact community, bring about community change, and also awareness. As you begin to navigate the local community, educating them about Africa, taking Africa on as, a part of your, as a part of your mantle, what does it mean in terms of community with regards to support, and then also at the same time having a community awareness?
That's a huge question because community is your superpower to me. And having community has been the backbone of what is Africa Everything because it takes a village. That saying is exactly what it is. It takes a village. And being able to mobilize and get community to buy into what's going on and help in their way. It doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. It could just be your time. And people really leave feeling full because they're being a part of change, So for instance, let's say the ticket is $30. You can buy a desk for a child for $30 in Africa. So you're able to do your due diligence and also being able to teach community and learn from community, I think is very important. I feel like as a diaspora, we have to keep on exchanging and learning from each other. And that's a big thing about our community mobilization work that we do within Africa Everything. And also empowering our local businesses, which is a movement on its own because we absolutely have to empower. And then we also partner with other organizations to bring the Africa feel to their organization. For instance, on August 4th, we partner with Barclays Center, the Social Justice Fund, to have an event in front of Barclays Afrobeats Takeover. So I want to continue being able to curate and be the, as a collective, as Africa Everything with all of our board members, which is our organization is totally volunteer based. Nobody gets paid. Everything goes right back to the cause. So when you say community, it's a big part of what it is because without community, I don't think it would have gotten as far as it has gotten today.
And when we talk about Africa yourself, you talked about going over and traveling. What's the experience like for people who've had the opportunity to go over who may not have ever been there, initial first response? What are some of the responses that you see, you hear, you get after taking people on the experience?
I've gotten tears. People have cried because being able to go through the door of no return, and for say in Ghana, for instance, and bringing it back, bringing your ancestors back home. So I've gotten cry, laughter, unbelievable experiences like thanks, and just people being able to realize that whatever it is that you can get in America, you get in Africa too. And being able to just mingle with the locals, learn the local language, or being able to eat, even just the culinary experience of eating African food is a journey for them. So the journey is always so fulfilling. So most of the people that I've gone to, because there's been one or two that maybe didn't enjoy it as much because sometimes you have to rough it. The light is not 24/7. Sometimes the light goes out. So what do you do then?
Right.
You light your candle and wait for it to come back on.
Right, right. But when you grow up here and you're from around the way, the first thing that people say is like, I'm not used to that. Then you find out who gets scared and who doesn't. But the truth is that yeah, it's a different life, but it's a life that's like really exciting culture, really exciting people, and not just exciting when I say culture and people, but really exciting to have the experience of being around your own and seeing such great progression.
Oh my goodness. It's leaps and bounds when you see the progress, the architecture, the roads, like everything is just so like they have such stunning homes in Africa. They're just, it's different. It's a different vibe. And also it's not as stressful. Like when you're here, New York City, America can be stressful for
Yes.
sure. So being able to have a place where you have peace of mind, your peace of mind. And a lot of people have the same coloring as you.
Right.
Everybody kind of looks like you, right? And it feels good just to be able to say that we're beautiful in all of our shades and hues, and we're not being discriminated against, we're being adored. And I think a lot of people honestly end up moving back. A few people that I've taken there are now living in Africa.
See? Well, Aisha, it's been great having you. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing and making a difference not just locally, but making a difference globally. And so certainly appreciate you and thank you for being with us and sharing.
Thank you for having me, Barry.
All right, take
I'll be
care now.
back soon.
All righty. We're taking a quick break, and guess what? We'll have more right after this. And welcome back. Democracy Matters is a nonpartisan organization empowering students to take an active role in politics and social justice activism. From fighting voter suppression and expanding voting rights to tackling the influence of big money in politics, Democracy Matters is at the forefront of creating a more just and inclusive democracy. Join me now to tell us more is the Executive Director at Democracy Matters, Professor Joan Mandle, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. So in the wake of all that has gone on over the course of the last, I'll say 24, 48 hours, how do you relate?
It's really tough, and I'm sure anybody that's listening is feeling pretty gobsmacked at this point. I actually was very worried about this election in terms of Trump's winning, and kept trying to talk to people about how they should be prepared. My main message, and we can talk about that as we go forward, of course, is that the fight for social justice is never easy. It's never short. It goes on, and we will go on as well, protecting democracy, protecting the most vulnerable among us, and pushing back as well as we can against the damage that I'm very worried that Trump will do to our democracy.
Yeah, and I think that's on the minds of a lot of people. I think when you talk about Latinos, immigrants, the LGBTQ plus community, African Americans, as a matter of fact, the list goes on, right? That there's so many people who've taken exception with President-elect Trump to the place that now it's kind of like questionable as to the path forward, right? And how do you navigate that path forward? So in your conversation in spaces, what do you say to people about how to forge that path forward of fighting for democracy, given the fact that you know the president-elect's history and what's gone on?
Yeah, well, I work with students, and both high school and college students. And one thing about young people is that they are usually pretty optimistic. And this has been, in a way, an exception to that because they've been very fearful of an election that would find Donald Trump as our next president. I think there are a few things that are takeaways that are positive. And as I said, one of the things is, I'm 80 years old. I've been active since the civil rights movement when I was in the South in 1964 with Freedom Summer. And I will continue, as long as I live, to continue the fight for social justice. But I think that one of the possible positive things that has come out of this is that half of the American people did not vote for Donald Trump and are very aware of the damage that he is able to do. It's no secret he is not a friend of democracy. He doesn't believe in democracy. He's said as much. The Republican Party has certainly acted as if they don't believe in democracy by trying to suppress the vote of anybody they can get a hold of, particularly African American, poor people, and students and senior citizens. So it's a very dangerous time right now. But I think that it's not. I mean, it looks like a landslide. It certainly was a terrible defeat for those of us, who believe in social justice and believe in democracy. But it's not as if the other people, those of us that wanted to see Kamala Harris as our president, are going to go away. We're not going away, and we will figure out how it is that we are going to try to, and what I think would be essentially limit his damage. He's going to do damage. There's no question about it. But we have to work together, all of us, as one. This is the most important time to build a coalition among all these groups that are against the threat that Donald Trump is to our democracy. We can't be divided up. And, we see that on college campuses where, the students that care about women's issues are in one group and environmental kids are in another group, and people who are worried about LGBTQ issues are in another group. We can't do that anymore. We need to understand that he is an existential threat to all our values, to all of the freedoms that we believe in, to all the rights that we have that he's already taken away. And we have to work together. We're going to go down together. It's
Right.
kind of as simple as that.
I want to talk from this perspective. Let's put the numbers out there. About 8 million people live in New York City. That's the 5 boroughs. We got about 8 million people. When I look at yesterday's numbers, only 9 million people voted. What do we say about that? And when I say 9 million people, I'm talking about 9 million people statewide. So we've got a huge issue.
Right. The American people in general are very cynical about and hostile to government. And one of the reasons that I think Trump won is that a lot of the people who feel that way voted for him. They don't really like the traditional Republican Party. They certainly don't like the Democratic Party. And this was just a sort of lashing out against government in general. And this government, this country's government, and this country's norms in particular. So there are a lot of ways that those of us that believe in democracy have been working to try to make voting more accessible to everyone. The idea of getting early voting is pretty new in New York. We worked for it for a long time. That has helped more people get to the polls. We need to have same-day voter registration, so you can just walk into the polls and say, I want to vote, and I'm going to register now. This whole registration deadlines and having to go through this whole process with the registration forms is crazy. There's no reason for it. In fact, what we should have is automatic voter registration. If you're born in the United States, you are eligible to vote automatically. And I think that those kinds of barriers, structural barriers, have meant that lots of people just don't want to go through the process of voting, don't know how to go through the process of voting. So that's part of it. Part of it is that as a country, and in New York especially, we have been very recalcitrant in making voting easy for everybody. The second is, of course, that, as I said, the cynicism about government means that some people just don't want to have anything to do with it. And I haven't seen the data on young people's turnout yet, but they are always the lowest turnout. And of course, that should be a bellwether for everyone. If our young people don't believe in our democracy enough to participate, there's something really wrong. And so I think that the structural stuff is important. And I think that the cynicism and the fact that politicians are not speaking to a lot of the people that are staying home. Again, young people, again, low income people, and they just don't think it's theirs to participate. They don't think it makes any difference.
Yeah,
And
you
that's-
know, you're tapping into something here, because when you talk about the numbers of people that didn't show up to the polls yesterday, yes, that was, I feel, record numbers. When I look around, I say, yeah, 8 million people in New York City, but then when we look at statewide, only 9 million people voted. We've got a huge gap here. But then I also look at the issues that matter the most, and we hear people talk about them on the daily. But as you hear people talk about these issues on the daily, it does not transcend into making its way into the booth to cast the vote. What is the barrier? Because, you know, this is an exercise of democracy. You have the opportunity to exercise your right to vote. This is democracy in action. But yet and still we have so many people that say, I'm not going to participate in this no matter what. Either they're not trusting the candidate, or they're just not trusting the process, or they're just pretty much apathetic. I don't know how do you define it, but coming off the heels of this, I got a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think part of it is that we don't educate people in this country from the time they're in kindergarten that they're part of a democracy. They're part of a country that depends on them, and the government isn't something separate from them. The government is them. I mean, the notion that somehow, you know, when you turn 18, you automatically get a conscience about participating in democracy, even though you don't know how, is really sort of ridiculous. I think we need to do a lot better job. What I've been advocating for years is having polling machines in middle schools, maybe even elementary schools, certainly high schools. Let students go through the process of voting and show them that it's an easy thing to do, it's an important thing to do. Have classes and teachers that are teaching civics in a way that makes people feel that the government, as I said, is theirs. And I think that would make it, certainly there's no silver bullet, but I think that would make a huge difference. I mean, I speak to students, we have chapters that really, you know, schools where the students are really smart. And a lot of them say, well, I don't really know what to do when I walk into a voting booth. I mean, it's a scary process for a lot of young people. And I think we could make that a lot easier for everybody. Your basic question, though, is why people don't trust government. And I think they think that government isn't doing anything for them. And I think that politicians have to learn to speak more directly to what we call breakfast table issues. You know, what people are eating, what people are doing in terms of the economy, how people feel safe or not safe in their neighborhoods. And not at the high level of, you know, sort of abstract policy, but bringing it right down to the level of people's everyday lives.
Yeah, there's this, you got two things going on here. You got the economy. People say, listen, when you look at the numbers that are out there, the economic trends that are trending, they're showing that things are actually getting better.
Exactly.
That's what they're showing that things are getting better. But when you look at the vote yesterday, a lot of people in exit polls come out and say, you know, the reason why I voted the way I voted was I have concerns about the economy. I was just having a conversation with a couple of people on our staff here prior to coming on, and I said, there is a difference between what is and how it translates to the life of the everyday person. So while these economic indicators can look good, and they look good, the person at home says, I don't see it because I'm still paying high prices for milk, travel, etc. and there is that disconnect. When we look at that, how do we approach people in the area of really, I would say dealing with this, because there is that disconnect. But if you're ever going to have true democracy in action, you're going to have to bring both of those sides kind of like closer together in order to get to that landing point.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that the economy has gotten better. I mean, my husband's an economist, and he tells me this all the time. Inflation is down, but people perceive it differently. Partially, they perceive it differently because people are bombarded by social media lies, frankly, that things are terrible. And even if it's okay for them, a lot of people feel, well, I'm okay, but it's a terrible situation out there. And I think that the Trump machine and the right has a very clear message to people that things are terrible. And I think that you tell people, a big lie long enough and they start believing it. So I think a lot of it is this sort of constant drumbeat about how bad things are. The other thing I think is that people are traumatized by COVID and by what happened in COVID and after COVID. And there's no question that the economy took a terrible hit with COVID. We have done amazingly well given how bad it was. But there's still a sense that there is this threat out there that everything can be taken away from me in a heartbeat. And I think psychologically, a lot of people, and I feel it myself, feel like, oh my gosh, around the next corner, is there going to be some major trauma that, like the one that we collectively as a society, as a world, went through during that COVID period.
Right. How do you view the future of democracy, given the fact of what we saw in recent results?
Well, this was a fair election. It is true there was voter suppression. It is true the Republicans did everything they could to block people voting, but we lost. There were more. I mean, we even lost the popular vote, which I never thought we would do. There were more people that voted for Donald Trump, and we have to look at that and try to figure out whether that means that democracy is dead or it means that democracy worked, and we didn't get the outcome we wanted, and that's partly on us, that we didn't do the kind of job of reaching out to those millions and millions of people and talking about our values and talking about social justice and why it should be important to them and not just to us, for example.
Right. And I said, getting up this morning, democracy worked. It was a fair election. Some people are not going to be are not going to be happy about the results, but the reality is, in most ways, it was a fair election, and we're not in the same throes as we were 4 years ago, or we're not talking about hanging chads anymore, right? We're at a place right now where we can honestly say democracy works. I think, sadly enough, a lot of people are not engaged in democracy. Right. Because they don't believe in democracy.
And our democracy was broken before this election.
Yeah.
If you have millions of votes that are suppressed, if you have former felons who can't vote, if you have $16 billion spent on this election, I mean, whose money is that? That is money of a tiny fraction of the American people, who are essentially calling the shots of both parties. And I mean, there's just no denying that Kamala Harris raised tons of money. But most of those folks are very wealthy people, and they have their own agenda. For example, the oil companies and the energy companies give to both Democrats and Republicans. And that explains, at least in part, why the United States has the terrible record on trying to deal with climate change, one of the worst of any democracy in the world. So the fact that rich people are really have an enormous amount of influence on elections, it means that our democracy does not have what we were promised, which is one person, one vote. that if Elon Musk can spend millions of dollars on this election, he's got more political power than you have or I have. So the democracy is a flawed democracy. It always was. This election was fair. But one of the things that I think we need to work on is fixing those flaws so that we have what I call an inclusive or a participatory democracy, so that everybody feels that their vote and that they have is equal to everybody else's, and that everybody has a stake in the outcome. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. What's got me so angry is that I feel that my vote has been swamped by these billions of dollars of billionaires, multi-billionaires, who have influenced the election in a way that is simply not fair.
Well, you know, we got to end this segment, but I'll tell you where I landed. I landed up, and especially in New York, when I thought about the numbers, I just feel like there are a lot of people, and that was nationwide, who've been given the right and chose not to exercise that right yesterday. And whatever outcome that we know that came about, it wasn't for the fact that people didn't have the opportunity just wasn't seized.
Mm-hmm.
And I think somewhere along the line, we've got to talk about getting from registration to activation, and then we can talk about how we can see democracy work. I love to see more people involved in the democratic process, but the reality is there's a lot of people been disenfranchised by the process. And so therefore, because of which, I'm not going to be a part of this because I don't think it's going to work for, I don't think that it's going to work for me. We need to really go back, and if we're going to do this, do it right and do it in such a way that democracy can still win. It won yesterday because people did have the opportunity to vote freely and to vote fairly. But there's still more to that democracy definition that we have to unpack. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people that recognize that. I mean, I know that my students are going to continue to do what they're doing, which is they're going to be holding conversations in their classes, holding conversations on campus, and talking about what went wrong from their point of view. What did we not do right? Or what structurally needs to change such that everybody has a fair voice and everybody uses that voice.
Yeah, it's important. It's important for it to happen. All right, well, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much. You got to come back. I will do that because it was so much, and we had to unpack these results and all this other stuff. But we want to talk a little bit more about the work that you're doing at hand too. And so you'll hear from our producers soon. Thank you so much.
Don't forget, there's a tomorrow, and the tomorrow is partially what you make it. So everybody has to sort of pull up their socks and decide what they want to do to help our country mend and heal.
That's it. Indeed, well spoken. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. We come to the end of our show today. Hope you enjoyed this week's discussion on the social justice forums. If you want to rewatch this week's episode, recatch the cablecast here on BronxNet.org. If you want to join the conversation, present your point of view, join us on social media at BronxNet TV. Join us next week. We'll continue to elevate the discussion and bring further awareness across the globe. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, saying take care. God bless.